Spirit of the North is a game I feel strangely divided on. At its heart, it's a beautiful third-person adventure through awe-inspiring landscapes and ancient ruins. But the more I played of this game, the further I fell into dips of confusion and frustration at its questionable design. And yet, it left me with this feeling that the game is worth talking about. So let's dissect this fox-filled winter wonderland as we journey through an enchanting world of spirits and shamans. Spirit of the North was released by Infuse Studio in November 2019, with an enhanced edition for next-gen consoles coming just over a year after. In it, we embody a fox who we follow on its travels through mountainous terrain in order to reach the very highest peak in the area. A simple enough premise, and all we need from the game to err us towards our goal. With no spoken dialogue from our protagonist, although did you really expect there to be, and all the people you come across in-game being in a somewhat debilitated condition when it comes to conversation, the game's narrative is presented to us purely through visual storytelling, as with many indie games, accompanied by a moving and emotive soundtrack to help set each scene. It's a unique and somewhat challenging way to communicate a story to the player, but as I'll explain, it does it quite well here. The game opens with our fox making their way through a blizzard as we are given control to navigate across some rolling, snowy hills. The environment has been laid with these rocky structures, constructed and placed in a way to guide the player in the intended direction to be taken. This is a great initial impression as it communicates to the audience through showing rather than telling us what to do and where to go. It lets you think for yourself, and I'm always thankful when games do this. Remember that for later. Our attention is soon brought towards the mysterious red streak flowing through the clouds above us, laying out a greater path as well as a foundation of our story. What is this brushing of red sown throughout the sky? The game's visual tone is left mostly cinematic, with no hidden existence and minimal controls in general. This game is clearly intended for those who enjoy the kind of games which lead you on a journey, focus being on traversal across landscapes and taking time with puzzle solving rather than mechanics like combat, which again you'd be foolish to expect here. You're a fox. That's right, there's a bark button, 10 out of 10 game. The bark button is also paired with the pick up staff button. I guess that just makes it a mouth button in general. The purpose of these staffs being to reunite them with their long gone owners, shamans of the mountain whose spirits were left entrapped within their corporeal bodies, at least until we come along to free them. There are 28 of these boys to grant rest to, and let me tell you, it's a few too many in my opinion, but we'll get to that. You're soon introduced to a new spirit guide companion, the Spirit of the North, if you will. Guardian forgotten, eh? Seems someone also forgot to spell check the achievements there, lads. This little guy helps lead you in the correct direction. Well, when it wants to, anyway. You're meant to be able to bark and the spirit will respond, giving you an idea of where it's at. Sometimes it just kind of vanishes though and you don't get any response, so that's cool. As I made my way into the caverns here, I took time to notice and appreciate the pretty damn beautiful graphics this game has to offer. Given I am playing the enhanced version for PS5, which for all I know could be a great improvement over the last gen version or simply an FPS boost, either way, it's really pretty for a smaller title regardless. Not that indies can't have stunning visuals when it comes to art style or environmental design, but Spirit of the North presents this particular element better than others. You journey through some really luscious landscapes throughout your experience, from snowy caverns to rolling green hills, ancient ruins and ethereal temples. This game really does showcase its beauty through the vistas it has to offer and does it spectacularly. Bodies of water look particularly nice and you get the adorable little detail of shaking your wet fur once you've done submerging yourself in the crystal waters of the mountains. I also thought this area was a puzzle before realising you just need to walk up the rocks here, and I needn't have bothered making it nearly half as difficult for myself as I did. I'm really smart guys, trust me. Chapter 1 introduces a charmingly fun and rather underused sliding mechanic when you come into contact with inclined icy terrain. I know what you're thinking, what is this, Jedi Fallen Order? But it really is fun building momentum and leaping from one patch of ice to another and once more into the snow like a real winter fox. And this mechanic feels super smooth and polished too. Something I wish I could say for more of the mechanics in this game. Yeah, this game is kinda not polished as best as it could be. Now, these aren't game breaking bugs, nothing that stopped me progressing or soft locked me out of playing, but they're irritating nonetheless and definitely noticeable enough to have me shake my head at the screen multiple times during my playthrough. Firstly, movement is just a bit naff in general. Throughout the game I constantly encountered silly little problems with the collision where Mr. Fox would just collide with objects way before he'd actually visually touch them. This made it frustrating when it came to my judgment in measuring jumps when I should have been able to make them but for some reason couldn't. Take this jump here. I made it easily the first time but then couldn't execute it again. Here I get caught in a wall I'm trying to move past. And what's the deal with invisible walls? I totally get them when blocking off areas that they want you to solve a puzzle for to progress, or around map edges where you're literally not meant to go because they didn't make any game past that point. But there are some in places where they just don't need to be any. Why here, for instance? What purpose does restricting me here serve? Next, let's touch on controls. They're kept pretty simple, and that's not even a bad thing. You get your directional control, jump and interaction buttons, and a couple different abilities you gain as the game progresses. I like when things are simple. I feel it lets you focus your attention on the game world more, which they clearly wanted to showcase for good reason. Sometimes though, there is a bit of input drift when walking or swimming. In fact, it kinda just decides to do it even when you're not touching the joystick, so no, this isn't even a controller issue. Jumping, as I said, isn't great, although that came more down to the collision than the actual jumping itself. Circle, being the interaction/mouth button, is used to open spirit blooms, which don't always want to work anyway, but it's also then binded with picking up staffs, which can't be done at the same time, meaning you have to put the staff down, interact with the flower, then pick the staff up again and be on your way. Which doesn't sound too frustrating, but this scenario arises a lot, so imagine you have to do it over and over again, and oh, these animations take way too long to play out than they should. That wet fox animation that I call the cute little attention to detail at the beginning gets really repetitive when you fall into water every 7 seconds, just to have your movement halted for an additional few seconds when you get out. And I don't need to see a flower open up each time I interact with one, then watch the fox absorb the energy. Honestly, you're interacting with one of these sometimes every 10 seconds. It's almost as if they're deliberately trying to drag out my experience, when I know they don't intend to. Then you have the bugs that come along for the ride with some of these animations. Here our staff decided to remain in the same space-time coordinates I placed it down in, rather than move along with the platform it was on as the platform itself moved, so I had to find a workaround for that too. Additionally, you have unstable platforms that have you use gravity to move them, ignoring the concept of gravity, water levels not rising when raising the water levels, and hands down the most annoying bug was about halfway through the game, my controller began gently but continuously vibrating to no end. It only stopped for a brief time I interacted with things before continuing seconds after the action was completed. It almost felt like the in-game vibration was flipped, so it continuously went off whilst I did nothing, and the only times it felt like it should, it didn't. I'm not even sure how that happens. I've never come across an in-game bug like that in all my life. I was also walking around thinking, surely I'll get the run mechanic soon, which I knew was there as I checked the game controls menu at the beginning, and it exists, but since I couldn't do it, I figured it was something I could only do with energy, or it was something to do with progression. No, it was just bug 2. It didn't decide to start working until this section here, which was when I was about 80 minutes into the game. Unfortunately, it seems the controls and slow animations in this game are inextricably intertwined with minor yet frustrating bugs. So, what about the other aspects of the game design? Well, I do love games without a HUD. It's cleaner and doesn't distract you, so no HUD or objectives is great, providing you don't need a HUD or objective. Some instances though, I did. How was I meant to know to return to the big stone in this section and interact with it when it wasn't full up? Nothing had indicated to me to do so. It just would have been nice if the game had made these sort of things more apparent. In the ruins portion of the game, it's hard to know where you're going in these areas, especially the dark ones. I mean, look at this room. Where should I have gone here? Because it looked to me like a dead-end room, and I spent 5 minutes running around before looking online to find out actually I was in the right place all along. The exit was completely hidden with no way of knowing it was even there because it was so damn dark. No light source to indicate this was a path and not just a dark void in a poorly lit corner of a room. Chapter 5 unnecessarily annoyed me with these stone structures. I was lost on what to do here, only to realise the stone apparently needed to power up these gates was so out of place. I know I said I liked a game that made me think, but I didn't even know I had gone past the object I needed to interact with. This would have been an incredibly useful time for that wisp that follows you around to give you hints to help you out here. I don't know why the devs wouldn't have implemented this feature for the wisp, it seems like an obvious use for it. All my complaints aside, the world is still beautiful regardless. This chapter funnily reminds me of the Land of the Living Dead from Rayman 3, and that made me realise this is the only other game to ever capture that strange feeling, something ancient and mystical about a peaceful corner of the world. It's probably the fact that both these games heavily rely on their soundtrack to build the ambience and atmosphere of these places. It's simply communicated excellently. Now, let's touch on puzzles, the only remaining thing that demand your focus in this game. Most puzzles consist of matching some symbols on a stone, navigating in your spirit form through vines caused by mysterious corruption, as well as destroying plague tethers, the sources for this gross infestation that's spread across the land. Think of it as the same kind of stuff as the nests in Plague Tale, or the red blight from Horizon, or the symbiote nests from Spider-Man 2, or the mold from Control. I guess this is a pretty common video game trope. Puzzles are engaging, until they're not. Solving them gets repetitive repetitive, like here, having you go back and forth getting spirit power from spirit flowers to use a single time on plague blobs corrupting these stones, and then in the same area having you do it again to imbue those exact stones with spirit energy. Another having you transform into spirit form to interact with more of these turning stones, but the spirit form only lasts just enough time to reach one and interact with it a single time, meaning you have to continuously go into spirit form, run up this waterfall, go around and interact with them multiple times. This isn't challenging or fun game design, it's just frustrating and time consuming. For what reason? The most frustratingly designed one was towards the tail end of the game, no pun intended, where certain interactable stones changed the levels of this rocky structure you needed to pass through, with it first having to be aligned, each stone changing the height of the core component at different corresponding extents. Simple enough puzzle, classic design, no problem. The way most would have gone about its design would be so you could readjust the main component of the puzzle quickly to find a result. Take this puzzle from Resident Evil 2 Remake for example, a game of flawless design. This puzzle holds essentially the exact same premise, interact with multiple points to adjust levels and reach a successful match. Except it all takes place at a single point. This little lab experiment is done with 3 buttons on one device shown on screen. Now imagine instead each of these buttons is placed at opposite ends of the lab and you must pace back and forth simply to press one, each and every time with the camera cutting back to the machine so you can watch the levels rise or fall. It would be infuriating. And yet that's exactly what's been done here. You have to run around this dark ass cave going from one stone to another and wait as it shows you each change you've made for the camera to linger on this shot for literally 5 seconds each time. This puzzle took me 10 minutes in total, but the point being it should have taken half that time, and that can be said for so many puzzles in this game. It's no wonder I felt they overstayed their welcome. I feel the game would have benefited from not having any side activities off the beaten path, like the 28 shaman spirits to free, or the murals hidden across the world to turn blue for some reason. If only it just had environmental storytelling, bodies in different positions and contexts for example, even notes to read scattered across the world to tell a story and further build the mystery of why everyone here died. Although I get why they might not have had readable text in the game where you play as a fox, so that's fair actually. Were there not busy work to do and Spirit of the North instead was a tight, focused, linear, one and done type of game, I think it would have cut down the very slightly dragged length of 4 hours and made for an overall better experience. Because despite all I've said, this is still a good one. I don't mind simple and minimal gameplay mechanics. I for one enjoy just travelling through the game at a steady pace, taking things in. But when I'm met with constant puzzles, some of which are no more creative than the last than half an hour ago, lighting up another 5 stones in a circle for example, it just serves to pad out the game unnecessarily. I really wish this wasn't the case because the end of the game is actually quite good. It just didn't have the same impact it would have had if I wasn't wanting everything to be wrapped up at this point. The portion of the game where you journey to the spirit world is again visually stunning. You have this ethereal realm of tall trees, bright fireflies and shimmering waters to navigate, eventually reaching the spirit that has been guiding you before they help you leave. Making your way back to the entrance of the spirit world via this bridge of light was probably one of the biggest missed opportunities of the game to put the sliding mechanic back in here one last time, as it would have been really sick to just slide down here, just saying. By the end of my journey I would say I was still satisfied with the experience that was delivered. What makes it so much more painful is that this isn't anywhere near a poorly made game. It just needed those tweaks and some polish here and there to make it into the flawless experience it deserved to be. I can deal with a bit of jank in all honesty. I really can overlook such things when the rest of the game is showing me the love and care put into it. The landscapes, the soundtrack, the emotional investment I felt keeping me enthralled in this lost and ancient world and connecting me to all those who once were now gone. I very much anticipate the sequel announced last year and to see where they go with the world and its mythos. I only hope it retains all the good elements this title had to offer and tightens up and improves on those poorer ones, because the sequel truly deserves it. But even though the first game in this series falls short with its flawed puzzles and unclear level design, I still have this positive feeling that, encaptured within a world of beauty and grandeur, Infuse Studio crafted a fantastic experience that just fell short of reaching its peak, but will leave you in good spirits either way. Thank you for watching.